And this one is blocked once again, and the Irish have it. Botello gets a hand on it. Prince Colley has the football, and into the end zone goes. Play action deep down the field, and that pass is caught for the touchdown. Tobias Merriweather, the true freshman, intercepted again by Benjamin Morrison. Here goes Morrison down the sideline. Can he go? Yes, he can. Touchdown, pick six, Benjamin Morrison.
All right, it's time to talk Notre Dame football on the Ourlads Football Network for the OFN today. We are still a few weeks away from the beginning of the season, but there is one team that's kicking it off overseas. Actually, two. I don't want to disparage any of those Navy fans, but one team, though, that is going to be starting overseas that is a contender for the national championship, and that is these Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And that means we're going to be joined by Kyle Kelly, who's been with us before, now with the On3.com network. You can also check out blueandgold.com for Blue and Gold Illustrated. Kyle, it's great talking Irish football again with you.
Yeah, happy to be back. Really appreciate you always having me on. And anytime you get to talk Notre Dame football, it's exciting because that means football's here or just about around the corner, and that's exactly where we are right now.
That's right. And so that's an August game, correct?
Yep, August 26th, the final Saturday of the month.
That's awesome. Is that kickoff like the entire college football season?
I'm not certain, but it is a week 0 game,
Yeah.
so it'll certainly be one of the first few. I know sometimes the networks like to have a weekday game. I know Labor Day is always popular, but yeah, I would have to check. But certainly one of the first games of this college football campaign.
Yeah, and I remember looking at that week 0 games. I'm pretty sure this is like the game of that week 0 because there usually aren't many big week 0 games. But look, there was a close game last year, and every few years you get a close Notre Dame Navy matchup. So I'm not sure how it's going to work, but that travel can be a little bit difficult. You never know what you're going to get, especially since it's the first game of the season.
Yeah, I think so, but I also think that Marcus Freeman in his second year as head coach, he's found different ways to adapt to whatever circumstance is thrown at him. Just like, for example, their strength and conditioning coach left, I think, like 2 days before fall camp abruptly, and he already had a plan in place on how to replace him, and pretty smooth, seamless transition there. And I would have to think that with all the support staff Notre Dame has surrounding Freeman, that playing overseas week 0 probably wouldn't be a major hiccup. I think during the season would probably be much more difficult because you're already in a routine, but I think Notre Dame's already started to prepare for that, whether they practice on grass fields or practice at different times of the day. I've been over to Ireland before. I know once you get over there, it takes about a day or two to adjust, but I don't think it's going to.
You there, Kyle? Oh, you back, Kyle? We lost you there for a second.
Me.
Yep, I don't know what happened.
I'm here.
You're good. So you were just saying that you think everything's going to be okay as far as the trip is concerned then?
Yeah, I think so. I think once they get there, it'll take a day or two to adjust, but I imagine they'll get there with plenty of time to spare. And once they're there, once the ball kicks off, it'll be time to play football.
All right. So I'll tell you what we're going to do first is I'm going to pop up the depth chart, the Ourlads.com depth chart for Notre Dame. We're going to start with the offense, and wow. This might be the biggest single player transfer of the entire season, having Sam Hartman come over from Wake Forest. I think it's a very smart decision by Hartman. I think he did as much as he could do for Wake Forest, and now it's a situation where I think it would be smart for him to try to up his game on the national stage more and maybe even get himself to that next level, because I think he's got the ability, his size and all that as far as a pro, but I think he's got the ability. We'll see what this coaching staff can do for him. This must be an exciting situation for Irish fans to have this kid coming over.
Yeah, no, it certainly is. I think that after last season's quarterback debacle, Notre Dame definitely needed an upgrade at the position. And even though that Drew Pine and Tyler Buckner, who both started games for Notre Dame last year, were set to return, I guess basically it was a short amount of time. Drew Pine ended up entering the transfer portal in early December, right after the regular season. But Notre Dame expected Tyler Buckner back, and he was back until entering the portal in the late spring. That Notre Dame really wanted to add competition and a veteran presence to the quarterback room after seeing what happened last year when they chose not to add a portal quarterback. And not only did they do that, they went out there and got the best option on the market. At On3, we have this like really cool tool. It's called like the transfer portal rankings, and in our transfer portal rankings, they have Sam Hartman as the number 2 overall player coming out of the portal. Just Travis Hunter coming from Jackson State, following Deion Sanders to Colorado, is ahead of Hartman, but I think Hartman as a quarterback has got a pretty strong argument for that number 1 spot. And Notre Dame, they went all out to go get him. That was kind of put in place more or less before Hartman's bowl game actually concluded. There was some behind the scenes work done with Notre Dame. Actually, the Wake Forest Rivals website did some excellent reporting with that Notre Dame had reached out to or started to begin to get the ball rolling. So overall, it happened fast and allowed Hartman to get up to campus as soon as possible, and he picked Notre Dame, and the ball really got rolling for the 2023 season.
Have you had an opportunity to see him in person a few times?
Yeah, so saw him on hand in practice in the spring about 5 or so times, and then same thing this summer for preseason camp. We've seen him. I've seen him at least about 5 times as well, as recently as last night.
Okay, and what was your impression considering some of the quarterbacks that you've seen at Notre Dame over the years?
Yeah, so this is my second year on the beat, but I definitely followed Notre Dame a lot growing up. Ian Book was a guy that I guess most recently that really excelled at Notre Dame with what he was asked to do, and I think that was evident by he got drafted in the 4th round and doesn't really have like that NFL quarterback skill set, but he made a heck of a college career for himself, and the New Orleans Saints took a chance on him. I think Book's still floating around the NFL ranks, but I think that Notre Dame really hasn't had a strong quarterback presence since Ian Book left. They've had a couple guys go in and out there with Jack Cohn, who was a graduate transfer guy similar to Sam Hartman, leadership guy. And then they tried to go the younger route with Buckner and Pine. That didn't really sort of work out. So the biggest thing that Hartman brought to the locker room was his veteran presence. He's a 6-year guy. He's a captain. He's a leader. All we've heard from the guys all camp is just how much respect they have for him and how much of a mentorship role he's had in the quarterback room for a lot of those young guys. And just like you've seen this year, that Steve Angeli, Notre Dame's backup quarterback, has made a massive jump from year 1 to year 2. And I have to think that Sam Hartman has something to do with that, kind of challenging him and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I think that the biggest thing that we've just seen during practice is just that veteran presence, that command, that leadership that Notre Dame really kind of missed last year. That's not to say Drew Pine or Tyler Buckner weren't great leaders, but they were young guys trying to find a way to lead this team. Sam Hartman comes into Notre Dame with 5 years under his belt. He knew right away, how to get a team to come together and really kind of follow them and guide them.
All right, so you mentioned the young part of that quarterback room. So is Angeli, is he the future Angeli?
Tough to say, depending on you ask. In my opinion, I think it's going to be Steve Angeli. Marcus Freeman said as much, I think, on the first press conference that he had this preseason camp. There's only 2 scholarship quarterbacks behind Hartman, Angeli, who's a sophomore, and Kenny Minchie, who's a true freshman. And Marcus Freeman pretty much said that they had the option to go to the transfer portal route for another quarterback after Tyler Buckner transferred in the spring. They felt comfortable enough with Steve Angeli and Kenny Minchie heading into this season that if Sam Hartman were to get hurt, they think that both those guys can step up and give Notre Dame an opportunity to win games. So certainly a lot can happen from now until next year at this
Yep.
time. But just from what we've seen from Steve Angeli, I think he is a guy that's going to be able to be a starting quarterback for Notre Dame.
All right, now let's take a look at the weapons that Sam Hartman is going to have at his disposal. Unfortunately, no Michael Mayer. He's gone. It's tough seeing him go, of course. But as far as the receiver room in general, and Tyree, I guess, has made the switch full-time to receiver. So was that out of need? So how does that receiver room look right now?
Yeah, I guess just starting with Chris Tyree, I mean, it was kind of a little bit of both like a need and then just attrition on the running backs room. Notre Dame had two excellent running backs last season with Audric Esme and Logan Diggs that both pretty much carried the workload. Uh, and there wasn't really a role for Chris Tyree as a running back. And at the same time, Notre Dame needed more of a boost at the slot wide receiver position, which is why they moved Tyree from running back to slot receiver.
Okay.
He's always had that great skill set to be a pass catcher. He's elusive. He's quick. Just your ideal slot receiver. And it wasn't necessarily a seamless transition at first, but he's really found a niche and a role for himself so far through summer camp. Notre Dame's running backs, although Diggs ended up entering the portal in the spring, transferring to LSU, Audric Esme is a guy Notre Dame really thinks is probably one of the top 5 running backs in all college football. And then the guys behind them, I think they only have a combined 5 collegiate snaps. Although they're young, Jabron Payne, he showed a lot of encouraging signs in the spring. Also behind Payne is Jadarian Price, who's coming off a torn Achilles. Doesn't really have that burst yet, but he looks like he's comfortable, ready to play college football. And then Jeremiah Love, a true scholarship freshman, he's got that build. If he needs a play, he can go. He's fast. He's extremely flexible. He's going to be a really exciting player for Notre Dame down the road, and it might be tough to keep him on the field. So that's pretty much the reason why Tyree switched to wide receiver, and that gives Notre Dame a exciting option coming out of the slot. And then, kind of on the outside, their main guy is Jaden Thomas, who everyone expects to have a major role this year with Hartman throwing the football. And then opposite of Thomas, everyone's looking for Tobias Merriweather, the exciting sophomore, to step up. There was a lot of encouragement and even maybe a little pressure for Tobias to play a big role last season as a true freshman, just because Notre Dame's receivers didn't really perform well consistently. Unfortunately, Merriweather, as soon as he got the opportunity to receive more playing time in the season, suffered a concussion, kind of put him out for the year and put him in a funk. Didn't really have the opportunity to get going again. So that's a guy that Notre Dame really needs to step up as well in year 2. So those are predominantly going to be the 3 wide receivers that you're going to see Notre Dame really use. And on that second team, they have a lot of exciting freshmen and some combined with some other veteran presences. So to say the least, Notre Dame's wide receiver core is much improved since last year.
Who has the biggest upside, Merriweather or Thomas?
I think upside would be Merriweather. I mean, he's 6'4", 204, really lengthy. He had 1 touchdown catch last year. That was a really exciting play. He ran a post right into the end zone, and that everyone thought that was his breakout moment. But just ever since that moment on, he didn't really get to see the field because of that injury. So I think Jaden Thomas is a guy that kind of what you see is what you get. I think he has a chance to be a solid day 3 NFL draft pick, could maybe work himself into the day 2 conversation with really strong this year, and maybe coming back to Notre Dame, having a good 4th year. But I think Tobias Merriweather, there's so much exciting ability. He was an excellent track guy in high school. He's got the speed, he's got the length, he's got the catch radius. He just kind of has to put it all together, and I think that's what everyone from Notre Dame is waiting on.
All right. One of the other thing I noticed, some of the interviews I've already had this season, Notre Dame seems to have the least amount of transfers, even though we just spoke about Hartman. We're going to get to another impact one on defense, but is that because of the school? Is that because of just by design? What's the deal with the lack of transfers compared to some of the other teams in college football.
Yeah, Notre Dame is in a pretty tough position as far as adding transfer portal players to the roster. I think specifically undergrad players. I think that's where Notre Dame has really struggled to find ways to improve the team just because of the admission requirements.
Okay.
It's still difficult from uh, college to college for those credits to transfer over and get these guys to graduate on time. I think like it's maybe there's an argument that it's easier for like a true freshman to transfer just because they take some of those basic classes. They haven't really gone deep into their major yet, so if they do transfer to Notre Dame, you're not really losing a whole lot of credits. Like there was a couple of true freshmen Notre Dame looked into last year. They ended up going elsewhere. So Notre Dame's biggest niche in the transfer portal has been the graduate transfer route. That's what Sam Hartman is. That's what all these guys that they've assembled. That there's about 6 or so guys. Antonio Carter, a safety from Rhode Island. Devin Ford, a running back from Penn State. Thomas Harper, a defensive back from Oklahoma State, I think. Drawing a blank there. But there's just a lot of guys that have been able to, Notre Dame has been able to choose to plug and play. And those are the graduate guys, and those are the guys that Notre Dame's kind of looking for those that veteran presence, that leadership, experience under their belt. So, although Notre Dame hasn't been able to take advantage of some of the younger, exciting guys that enter the transfer portal, they do find ways to get these. I mean, it's way easier to get graduate guys in for a graduate program and things like that. So those are the guys that Notre Dame primarily focuses on the transfer portal.
How's recruiting going for Freeman?
Pretty exciting first cycle in 2023. There was a lot of guys that top 100 guys. It was a pretty across the board exciting class. I think if I remember, finished right around top 5 in the On3 rankings.
Okay.
I was with Rivals last year at this time, so
yeah.
I know their rankings a little bit better off the top of my head. But I know in this recruiting cycle, Notre Dame in 2024, which would be recruiting all these rising high school seniors that kick off later this month for their seasons. Notre Dame has 5 guys that are top 100 players on one recruiting service or another, and then they have towards the back end all these guys that are ranked within the 500s to 700s in overall players. And those are guys that Notre Dame has really trusted their evaluations and identified that they think they're a little bit ahead of the curve compared to the internet recruiting rankings.
Yeah, sure.
Some of these guys, they don't even really have a ton of Power 5 offers, but these are guys that Notre Dame has identified that have elite athletic skills in one way or another, and really kind of banking on the upside there. So if you want to kind of describe Notre Dame's 2024 recruiting cycle, it's top heavy. They got a lot of guys for the top that should be not superstars for Notre Dame, but some really good football players. And then kind of towards the end is your diamonds of the rough that they're really banking on to kind of be like a boomer bust sort of prospect.
And that's up to the coaching staff. That's what it's about, and finding the guys that work for you. And if you are successful, it just shows you that you have a really good coaching staff that's getting the best out of these types of players. So we'll see how that takes place over the next couple of years. Let's get back to one more position on offense before I ask you about defense, and that is the all-important offensive line. So everybody knows Joe Alt, college football. So he's got obviously big-time pro ability, so he's going to be looked at this year. The other side, Blake Fisher, not as known as Alt, but there's a lot to like there. And then it seems to be overall a very strong unit.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, just when you have, Joe Alt as your primary guy as left tackle, and this is a guy that everyone pretty much expects to be a top 10 NFL draft choice as a true, after 3 college football seasons next year. So just as a whole, the entire Joe Alt's presence makes that entire O-line group just hit another level. And I know you mentioned Blake Fisher. He actually started week 1 as a true freshman at left tackle, but suffered an injury that knocked him out right around halftime. Notre Dame had to shuffle left tackle 2 years ago, ended up settling on Alt, who becomes this outstanding player. So Fisher was a highly ranked recruit coming out of Fort Wayne in Indiana. He's a athletic guy. He's huge. He's like 6'7". I guess measurables right now. I think it's about 6'6", 315 pounds. And he's an exciting player if you can put it all together. He had a pretty solid season last year. I think it was basically his freshman season just because he had played only 2 games prior. He did end up getting to play in the bowl game his freshman year. But last year, I mean, it was more or less his first full season at Notre Dame. So this year, I think they're really expecting Blake Fisher to take that next step. With his talent, I think that can be expected. And where the questions really come in are at the guard spots. Notre Dame is shuffling around there. They've tried many different combinations at right guard and left guard, and that's where some of the uncertainty comes into play. Luckily, they do have a center that's returning with Zeke Carell. He played all last year at center, but both the guards are going to be new. And I guess if you had to pick spots on the offensive line where you would want the inexperience, probably would be guard, just because center is obviously in charge snapping the football and making all the pass protection calls and kind of orchestrating the offense. And, of course, the tackles are really in charge of protecting the quarterback, setting the pocket. So not a huge concern as of now, but I think once we get into the season, if we see Notre Dame start to struggle running the ball, if they do allow some of that interior pressure, that's where all Notre Dame fans are going to start clamoring after some of those interior guys.
And is there anybody, as far as that group is concerned, that we should just keep an eye on the most? Is there someone that they're hoping that maybe appears to have a leg up on the other guys? Or is it pretty open all across the board?
So we thought there were pretty much 2 guys, Andrew Kristofic and Billy Strouth, that were going to come in and solidify both those spots, but I don't think that can be said at this point in fall camp.
Okay.
But the one guy that's kind of in a make-or-break year is Rocco Spindler. He's a junior from Michigan area. He was a highly touted recruit. Has really kind of had trouble adjusting to the college speed and developing into a Notre Dame caliber offensive lineman. And under first-year offensive line coach Joe Rudolph, we've kind of seen him take that next step. There's still bright spots and some dull spots as well with with Rocco Spindler. But I think that's a guy that Notre Dame it's basically now or never for him because there are some young guys behind him. So they're giving him a shot. He's getting first-team reps, so we'll have to see if he can make it happen.
Okay, definitely something to keep an eye on in that week 1 matchup and see how that develops. Let's now move on over to the defensive side. And another one of those, actually a couple of those grad transfers we were talking about. Up front, Jean Baptiste comes over from Ohio State. So is he, if you're looking at, you got him up front, but you also have Harper in the secondary. And Carter also is somebody maybe we should keep an eye on. Who's the top transfer on defense, if there is one?
Probably Javonte Jean-Baptiste, just because he's coming from Ohio State, another guy that was a great recruit. Just didn't really put it all together. I feel like that's a theme of this little podcast here is about guys trying to put it all together, but didn't really do that at Ohio State. Al Washington, I think, played a role in recruiting him to Ohio State when Washington, Notre Dame's line coach, was on Ohio State's staff. So I think that there was a time during the offseason where I had heard that Javonte Jean-Baptiste was Notre Dame's Sam Hartman of the defense.
Okay, so that's pretty big news. Yeah.
I think it was a lot of hype, I guess. That seems like kind of unfair, but yeah. I think just because of that comment, I think that when you're looking at the grad transfers that came in, I think you have to give that to JJB.
Okay. All right. So then up front, what are you thinking? Because there are some key guys that are gone. Obviously, Foskey's gone. That's a big loss. But as far as the defensive line and the edge rushers, start up there. What do you think about what they have coming back?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting position because Isaiah Foskey really manned that what Notre Dame calls their Viper end position, which is like a weak side defensive end, like hybrid linebacker type of player. Foskey had that role for 2 or 3 years. He left Notre Dame as their all-time sacks leader, and you think about all the great
Yeah.
defensive linemen that have come through Notre Dame, and Foskey surpassed those guys, set that record. Um, Foskey, admittedly, did not have as big of a season as everyone was expecting last year. So I don't think that it's like this massive loss on defense,
Okay.
but there's still some uncertainty of how Notre Dame is actually going to be able to replace him. Jordan Botello, a guy that transitioned from linebacker to Viper, is the first team guy right now. He was actually Notre Dame's most effective pass rusher last year. But can he do that for 4 quarters? Can he do that for an entire game? That remains to be seen. And then Notre Dame moved 2 other linebackers to the Viper position. They're both true sophomores, junior Tui Halamaka and Josh Burnham. Both those guys have been going back and forth, replacing Jordan Botello on the second and third teams. And then there's an exciting freshman, Boubacar Traore, from the Boston area that has flashed in spots. So he might see a little bit of time. But Notre Dame is probably really going to be relying on Botello to take that step up and fill the void that Foskey left.
Okay. Then run defense. How was the team last year, and what do you expect this year?
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think pretty respectable overall. The theme of the Notre Dame defense was good but not great, and I think run defense, you would definitely say the same thing. A lot of veterans guys at that in the interior spots. Riley Mills, he's moving from that big end that Javante Jean-Baptiste is going to play this year, and he's moving inside to 3 tech, which is more of his true position. He's kind of playing out of place last year, and he's going to man the 3 tech spot this year. Then there's Howard Cross, who had a pretty great year last season when he was healthy. He's going to be the nose guard. He's a fifth-year guy. So those two are going to be the first-team guys, and Notre Dame's going to be looking toward Jason Anye and Gabe Rubio, both juniors, to take that next step and not only become guys that can rotate in, but also guys that Notre Dame's going to rely on to make plays.
All right. And then the linebackers, the two guys specifically, Kaiser and Bertrand. So Bertrand, is he right now considered the team's best defender?
I wouldn't say so. I think the best defender is probably Benjamin Morrison, who's their starting cornerback, was a freshman All-American last season. Bertrand catches a lot of slack from Notre Dame fans.
Why?
Just not incredibly athletic in space, not the best in pass coverage, that sort of thing. But I think he does catch a lot of slack. Like I think he is a solid football player and a good one, probably, if you want to classify him that way. But I wouldn't say he's the best guy, but he's a guy that is your prototypical Mike linebacker, great in run defense, very smart guy, fifth-year guy, graduate guy, probably going to be a captain this year. Like, he's the guy you want in the middle of the defense.
Yeah, just taking a look at the depth chart, I see as many as 7 potential graduate starters. That's possible, right? Not to mention a couple other seniors. That's a veteran group on defense.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. I mean, all 3 of your linebackers are graduate guys. You got 2 guys on the defensive line that are graduate guys. The guy opposite Benjamin Morrison's cornerback is Cam Hart. He's a graduate guy. So
yeah.
DJ Brown, free safety, another graduate guy. So yeah, that is a big-time veteran defense.
What you mentioned you mentioned Morrison. So, and wow, what a career he looks like he could have after, like you said, freshman All-American last year. So I'm sure they're really counting big on him. But we mentioned a little bit on Harper. He's a graduate transfer. Talk about the secondary in general. Is this a strength? One of the strengths of the defense, if not the strength?
Yeah, you just took the words out of my mouth. I think it is. If you had to point to one spot, I just think because there's a little bit too many questions surrounding the defensive line heading into the season, and the linebackers, that's kind of like what you see is what you get.
Yeah.
Whereas the cornerbacks, I think you really expect, if you want to talk about just position group as a whole on the defense, it's 100% the cornerbacks that are going to be your best spot. The safeties are really interesting because they're another group that is kind of make or break. They got a lot of different guys that they could use. I think 4 guys between DJ Brown, Ramon Henderson, Antonio Carter, and Xavier Watts. They're really going to probably see the field in different spots for Notre Dame this season. But I think it's like boom or bust for those safeties. Those cornerbacks are kind of super solid. There's a lot of great talent in that cornerbacks room. And if those Notre Dame safeties can arise to the occasion and continue their development, I think you're definitely going to be talking about Notre Dame, that secondary being the strongest part of the defense.
All right. Now, give me a breakthrough player on both sides of the ball, somebody who hasn't yet developed into a difference maker that you believe could become a household name this season.
For offense, I'll go to tight end. Holden Stays, a sophomore. He is kind of looking like the guy that's going to replace Mayer. I think at first we expected it to be Mitchell Evans, the junior, but I just see Mitchell Evans as that perfect tight end number 2. That's the role he played last season. He's exceptional in that role. He's a fine number 1 guy, but I think Holden Stays is much more athletic. You see more shades of Michael Mayer and Stays compared to Evans. And just in some of the portions of practice we've seen this year, Holden Stays has kind of been Sam Hartman's go-to red zone guy. So I'm going to pick Holden Stays on offense to kind of fill Michael Mayer's void. Hopefully he comes up big for me. And then on defense, I know in our preseason magazine at Blue and Gold Illustrated, I believe I picked the breakout player to be Jason Anye. He had a pretty great spring. I don't know if I've seen as much in the summer, but I'm gonna change my pick here, and I'm actually going to go with a freshman, Jaden Osbury.
Okay.
This is a guy that is the backup rover position, which is Notre Dame's like hybrid safety, sort of outside linebacker, like your kind of plays that position in addition to the Mike and the wheel guy. He's kind of like your Sam. And Maris Liufau led Notre Dame in snaps on the defense last year. He plays that position for Notre Dame. He's a graduate guy. But I think Notre Dame's really going to need to see a lot more out of Liufau this season. If they don't, they have Jaden Osbury behind him, who has had a great fall camp. We just saw him last night, and he had an excellent practice, a tackling machine. I did see him give up a long pass downfield, but for a freshman, he's a little bit ahead of the curve, and maybe a little bit of recency bias on my end, but just from what we saw from Jaden Osbury last night, I think one way or another he's going to carve himself out a role on the Notre Dame defense.
All right, good ones. And what about the special teams? Notre Dame seems to always have good special teams. Another good special team unit?
Well, last year they had one of the best in the country, and as a result, their special teams coordinator, Brian Mason, was hired by the Indianapolis Colts. So Notre Dame had to replace him with Marty Biaggi, former kicker at Marshall. Biaggi actually spent some time on Notre Dame staff before, so he's in his first year. And they got a graduate kicker, Spencer Schrader, who has been very solid so far, if I have to say, during camp. I really have not seen him miss a lot of kicks. He has a leg. He comes from South Florida. Then at punter, there's a little bit more of a competition between Ben Krim, who's a graduate transfer from Penn, and Bryce McPherson, a sophomore. I think right now that Bryce McPherson is going to get that nod. The ball comes off a little bit differently from his foot. Uh, he's got the distance, the hang time. Crim's obviously got the experience, but I think when all's said and done, it's going to be tough to keep McPherson off the field.
All right. And then what about the schedule? We talked about Navy, and as usual, Notre Dame has got some tough with this independent schedule. They always have this tough schedule, and this is a tough one because North Carolina State and Clemson on the road, and then Ohio State and USC at home. So this is as tough as I've seen it in a few years. These because they're playing these teams that are going to expect to have strong seasons. So especially USC with a potential Heisman winning quarterback, and Ohio State's always good. So yeah, what about that schedule, and what about overall? What is your prediction based on that schedule for Notre Dame this season?
Yeah, I mean, there's really going to be 3 games that make or break Notre Dame's year, and it's going to be Ohio State, USC, and Clemson. Depending on the outcomes of those games, that's going to determine where Notre Dame falls in the bowl seeding and certainly any potential college football playoff aspirations as well. I think I said 10-2 in our preview magazine. Kind of right there, to be honest. I'm not ready for 11-1 yet. If I had to lean one way, I'd maybe say 9-3. Just because of, like I said, USC, Clemson, Ohio State. Those are 3 really big opponents.
Yeah.
Notre Dame doesn't really have a home field advantage compared to like a lot of these SEC and Big Ten schools, but Notre Dame did dominate Clemson on their own turf last year. So they held their own against Ohio State too for 3 quarters, and they played USC fairly well. Besides not being able to tackle the quarterback Caleb Williams, which is a pretty big deal. But since both those teams come to South Bend this year, I think Notre Dame will take one of 2 between Ohio State and USC. Clemson, I think, is a toss-up. And really the big thing, honestly, for Notre Dame is not to have Marshall or Stanford blunder like last year. That's what really derailed Notre Dame's season. And if they can perfect the wins against Navy, Tennessee State, NC State, Central Michigan, Louisville, Pittsburgh, Wake, and Stanford, I think overall you'll be looking at a pretty respectable outcome this season.
Yeah, because if they win all those games that you mentioned that they're supposed to win, that I believe is 8. So what it's saying is yeah, if you just go 2-2 against those 4 teams, you're at 10. And that's why maybe the Ohio State game could be the biggest game of the season, because if you beat NC State, which you should if the team has the ability that they think they do of being a national championship contender, then that Ohio State game is just everything, because that, first of all, gives you that marquee win that you need, and it also potentially puts you at undefeated, maybe going into the USC game, which could be monumental with a Heisman potential contender coming in. And knowing that even if you then just split USC and Clemson, that could still put you into the postseason. So
yeah, at 11-1, I think it's going to be tough to keep Notre Dame out. And if somehow they beat, if they win 2 out of 3 games, and say they go to Duke and lose or something like that, I think that Notre Dame will still have an argument at 10-2, but probably going to be a little bit difficult. I know Georgia and Michigan, they both got cupcake schedules this year. I think I actually picked them to be in the college football playoff. Alabama's always there. I think LSU's on the rise. So, it's gonna be a really interesting season for college football.
And with all the changes going on, what's Notre Dame's situation right now? Like 5 years from now, where's Notre Dame going to be?
They have no reason to not be independent. They got it made. People are still going to schedule Notre Dame. The TV dollars are worth it, and unless there becomes a scenario where the college football playoff does not allow independence for some reason, or they kind of don't consider them as strongly, which I don't think that will ever be the case with Notre Dame. Don't really see them making a move to the conference in the near future.
All right. Well, that is going to wrap it up, Kyle. I appreciate it as always. I look forward to the opportunity to talk to you during the season too, because there's again some of these big games, and if everything goes well for Notre Dame, there could be a headliner. So I'm going to be looking forward to that opportunity. In the meanwhile, your show, what you have a regular podcast?
Yeah, so Mike Singer and I, my recruiting counterpart at Blue and Gold, we are doing a recruiting show. I think it's going to be every Thursday during the season because him and I are traveling a lot on Friday nights. In the off season, we might transition to Fridays, but anyway, you can expect to see us on the Blue and Gold YouTube channel. We're going to be doing a lot of exciting stuff over there, and I'll tell you what, I have a tough time saying that there's someone else, another website in the beat that covers Notre Dame football like Blue and Gold. We, probably wrote a dozen stories between Tyler Horka and Jack Sobel are two predominant beat writers, and then me pitching in where necessary with our team coverage. So
Absolutely.
A lot of reporting from last night. So be sure to go check us out on Blue and Gold.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about, because if Notre Dame actually were to potentially, let's say they're a playoff team, then the possibility could be there for Sam Hartman as far as a Heisman contender. What do you think about that?
I think if Notre Dame is going to make the college football playoff, they are going to need Sam Hartman to be a Heisman finalist.
Yeah, I think
it's a simple way of saying it.
Yeah, he's not a bad one. He's now 16-1. He's in everybody's behind, of course, Caleb. But, I would probably put Sam Hartman and Jordan Travis out of all those 16-1 shots I see there. 14, 16, even 20. I'd put Hartman and Travis probably as the two guys that I would bank on the most going up against Williams. That could be a heck of a matchup if, imagine Caleb Williams and Sam Hartman head-to-head. If they're in the top 5 or something like that. It could be huge. Could be awesome. It's always great when Notre Dame is a contender in college football, and it's always great. And I mentioned this, I believe, with Brian Matthews, who you know from Rivals. I think it was when I was talking to Brian. But I spoke recently with someone regarding how great it might have been Matt Baker, covers Florida State for the Tampa Bay Times, about how great it is to have these programs like Florida State, Auburn, Notre Dame, and so forth relevant. And let's hope Notre Dame has that kind of season, because with Hartman, a one-trick kind of pony, 1 year kind of pony, I should say, this is probably Notre Dame's best chance for a couple of years, you would think.
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of like all in this year. We talked about a lot of the graduate guys on defense, and they're going to be much younger next season. So I think where you really start to kind of talk about it again is the 2025 season, when Marcus Freeman's got his recruiting classes in there. All these young guys will be 3 or 4 year starters. So we're really talking about now for Notre Dame football if they want to cash in back to the Final Four.
Kyle, appreciate it. Thanks for the time. I hope to talk to you during the season.
Well, I hope when we talk this time around, it won't be after a Marshall or Stanford loss. I remember that last year, and
that was bad timing.
Felt like we had to hit the panic button almost. But yeah, thanks as always.
You got it.